Hello, and welcome to All for the Journey. I'm your journey reader, Eric Thompson, and today's reading is taking place from the book of Ezekiel, chapters 41 through 43. Our scheduled reading follows the Bridges for Peace Ignite the Truth Bible reading plan. So let us begin. Chapter 41. After that, the man brought me into the holy place, the large main room of the temple, and he measured the columns that framed its doorway. There were 10.5 feet square. The entrance was 17.5 feet wide, and the walls on each were 8 3/4 feet wide. The holy place itself was 70 feet long and 35 feet wide. Then he went into the inner room at the end of the holy place. He measured the columns at the entrance and found them to be 3.5 feet thick. The entrance was 10.5 feet wide, and the walls on each side of the entrance extended 12 1/4 feet to the corners of the inner room. The inner room was 35 feet square. This, he told me, is the most holy place. He then measured the walls of the temple and found that it was 10.5 feet thick. There was a row of rooms along the side walls. Each room was 7 feet wide. These rooms were built in 3 levels, one above the other, with 30 rooms on each level. The supports for these rooms rested on ledges in the temple wall, but the supports did not extend into the wall. Each level was wider than the one below it, corresponding to the narrowing of the temple wall as it rose higher. A stairway led up from the bottom level through the middle level to the top level. I noticed that the temple was built on a terrace, which provided a foundation for the side rooms. This terrace was 10.5 feet high. The outer wall of the temple's rooms were 8 3/4 feet thick. This left an open area between these side rooms and the row of rooms along the outer wall of the inner courtyard. This open area measured 35 feet in width, and it went all the way around the temple. 2 doors opened from the side rooms into the terrace yard, which was 8 3/4 feet wide. One door faced north and the other the south. A larger building stood on the west, facing the temple courtyard. It was 122.5 feet wide and 157.5 feet long, and its walls were 8 3/4 feet thick. Then the man measured the temple, and he found it to be 175 feet long. The courtyard along the building, including its walls, was an additional 175 feet in length. The inner courtyard to the east of the temple was about 175 feet wide. The building to the west, including its 2 walls, was also 175 feet wide. The holy place, the most holy place, and the foyer of the temple were all paneled with wood, as were the frames of the recess windows. The inner walls of the temples were paneled with wood above and below the windows. The space above the door leading into the most holy place was also paneled. All the walls were decorated with carvings of cherubims, each with 2 faces, and there was a palm tree carving between each of the cherubim. One face, that of a man, looked towards the palm tree on one side. The other face, that of a young lion, looked towards the palm tree on the other side. The figures were carved all along the inside of the temple, from the floor to the top of the walls, including the outer wall of the holy place. There were square columns at the entrance of the holy place, and the ones at the entrance of the most holy place were similar. There was an altar made of wood, 3.5 feet square and 5 1/4 feet high. Its corners, base, and sides were all made of wood. This, the man told me, is the table that stands in the Lord's presence. Both the holy place and the most holy place had double doorways, each with 2 swinging doors. The doors leading into the holy place were decorated with carved cherubim and palm trees, just as on the walls. And there was a wooden canopy over the front of the temple's foyer. On both sides of the foyer, there were recessed windows decorated with carved palm trees. Chapter 42. Then the man led me out of the temple courtyard by way of the north gateway. When we entered the outer courtyard and came to a group of rooms against the north wall of the inner court, this group of structures, whose entrance opened towards the north, was 175 feet long and 87.5 feet wide. One block of the rooms overlooked 35-foot width of the inner courtyard. Another block of rooms looked out onto the pavement of the outer courtyard. The 2 blocks were built 3 levels high and stood across from each other. Between the 2 blocks of the rooms ran a walkway 17.5 feet wide. It extended the entire 175 feet of the complex, and all the doors faced towards the north. Each of the 2 upper levels of rooms was narrower than the one beneath it because the upper levels had to allow space for walkways in front of them. Since there were 3 levels and they did not have supporting columns as in the courtyard, each of the upper levels was set back from the level beneath it. There was an outer wall that separated the rooms from the outer courtyard. It was 87.5 feet long. This wall added length to the outer block of rooms, which extended only 87.5 feet, while the inner block, the rooms towards the temple, extended for 175 feet. There was an entrance from the outer courtyard to these rooms from the east. On the south side of the temple, there were 2 blocks of rooms just south of the inner courtyard between the temple and the outer courtyard. These rooms were arranged just like the rooms on the north. There was a walkway between the 2 blocks of rooms, just like the complex on the north side of the temple. This complex of rooms was the same length and width as the other one, and it had the same entrances and doors. The dimensions of each were identical. So there was an entrance in the wall facing the doors of the inner block of rooms and another on the east at the end of the interior walkway. Then the man told me, "These rooms that overlook the temple from the north and south are holy. It is there that the priests who offer sacrifice to the Lord will eat the most of the holy offerings. And they will use these rooms to store the grains, sin offerings, and guilt offerings because these rooms are holy. When the priests leave the holy place, they must not go directly into the outer courtyard. They must first take off the clothes they wore while ministering because these clothes are holy. They must put on other clothes before entering the parts of the building complex open to the public." When the man had finished taking these measurements, he led me out through the east gateway to measure the entire temple area. He measured the east side, and it was 875 feet long. He also measured the north side and got the same measurement. The south side was the same length, and so was the west side. So the area was 875 feet on each side with a wall around it to separate the holy places from the common. Chapter 43. After this, the man brought me back around to the east gateway. Suddenly, the glory of the Lord, the glory of the God of Israel appeared from the east. The sound of his coming was like the roar of rushing waters, and the whole landscape shone with his glory. This vision was just like the others I've seen, first by the Kibar River, and then when he came to destroy Jerusalem. And I fell down before him with my face in the dust. And the glory of the Lord came into the temple through the east gateway. Then the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner courtyard, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. And I heard someone speaking to me from within the temple. The man who had been measuring was still standing beside me. And the Lord said to me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place where I will rest my feet. I will remain here forever, living among the people of Israel. They and their kings will not defile my holy name any longer by their adulterous worship of other gods, or by raising monuments in honor of dead kings. They put their idols, the idol altars, right next to mine, with only a wall between them and me. They defiled my holy name by such wickedness, so I consumed them in my anger. Now let them put away their idols and the sacred pillars erected to honor their kings, and I will live among them forever. Son of man, describe to the people of Israel the temple I have shown you. Tell them its appearance and its plan, so they will be ashamed of all their sins. And if they are ashamed of what they have done, describe to them all the specifications of its construction, including its entrances and doors, and everything else about it. Write down all the specifications and directions as they watch, so they will be sure to remember them. And this is the basic law of the temple: absolute holiness. The entire top of the hill where the temple is built is holy. Yes, this is the primary law of the temple. These are the measurements of the altar. There is a gutter all around the altar, 21 inches wide and 21 inches deep, with a curb 9 inches wide along its edge. And this is the height of the altar. From the gutter, the altar rises 3.5 feet to a ledge that surrounds the altar. The lower ledge is 21 inches wide. From the lower ledge, the altar rises 7 feet to the upper ledge. This upper ledge is also 21 inches wide. The top of the altar, the hearth, rises still 7 feet higher, with a horn rising up from each of the 4 corners. The top of the altar is square, measuring 21 feet by 21 feet. The upper ledge also forms a square, measuring 24.5 feet on each side, with a 21-inch gutter and a 10.5-inch curb all around the edge. There are steps going up to the east side of the altar. Then he said to me, Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. These will be the regulations for burning of offerings and the sprinkling of blood when the altar is built. At that time, the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok, who ministered before me, are to be giving a young bull for a sin offering, says the sovereign Lord. You will take some of its blood and smear it on the 4 horns of the altar, the 4 corners of the upper ledge, and the curb that runs along the ledge. This will cleanse and make atonement for the altar. Then take the young bull for the sin offering and burn it at the appointed place outside of the temple area. On the second day, sacrifice a sin offering, a young male goat that has no physical defects. Then cleanse and make atonement for the altar again, just as you did with the young bull. When you have finished the cleansing ceremony, offer another young bull that has no defects and a perfect ram from the flock. You are to present them to the Lord, and the priests are to sprinkle salt on them and offer them as a burnt offering to the Lord. Every day for 7 days, a male goat, a young bull, and a ram from the flock will be sacrificed as a sin offering. None of these animals may have physical defects of any kind. Do this each day for 7 days to cleanse and make atonement for the altar, thus setting it apart for holy use. On the 8th day and on each day afterward, the priest will sacrifice on the altar the burnt offerings and peace offerings of the people. Then I will accept you, says the sovereign Lord. Well, that concludes our reading today. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and we're grateful for God's word and how he feels about holiness. May we meditate on this for the rest of the day and throughout the week, and you have a blessed day.